Okay. Narration is memorized without contextualization, right? There has to be a relationship between what is said, right, and what is remembered, what is understood, the implications, right, the deductions that I can make based on what was said. All of these characteristics, and I'll spell this out later in more detail, are the foundations or the groundwork for higher order thinking, right, higher order learning, higher order educational pedagogy, right, a pedagogy which invites students to think critically, to challenge the very person who's delivering the information. But I jump ahead. The teacher is perceived as the gift giver. Right? The teacher is perceived as the gift giver. The teacher is perceived as the gift giver. And it's, it's obvious to see the implications of being a gift giver, right? The gift that is given by the teacher to the student is the gift of knowledge. I have content knowledge in primarily philosophy, mathematical logic, socio-political philosophy, genocide studies. That's my content expertise. I don't have constant expertise in sociology, anthropology, archaeology, geology. I don't have content expertise in that. Where I do have content expertise, the assumption is that I give this gift of transmitting this knowledge. I know something, blah, 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 blah. Now you know what I know, right? But what really happens is that the exchange of information has been completely static. Cat is on the mat. I was taught, I teach you, and I have in my videos taught you. Cat is on the mat without augmenting it in any sense. And I recognize that all I'm doing really in that mode is just statically transferring information, right? The information becomes redundant or even tautological. And I can go on Hume at this point, but I won't, right? So that there's an impression that there's meaning, right? But really and truly, a tautological claim, just on a quick tangent, A is true, right? This state of affairs is true, but Hume says it's totally meaningless, right? Similarly, if I give you content information as an instructor, and you learn that content information, and you can recite that content information back to me, then there hasn't really been any sufficient transformation of that content knowledge. It's just been A equals A. So while you might get that answer right on a test because you tell me what I told you, you haven't really learned anything. The content of your education is essentially meaningless, and thus the system of education is meaningless, right? It's pointless, it's futile. And we'll see in a second why and what the function of this traditional educational paradigm, what it is, and the function that it has in this pedagogy of the oppressed. The assumption is that better teachers have more content to give, right? Better teachers have more content to give. So you can imagine that I am instructor, we're looking at two instructors and one student, right? So you have instructor 1 and you have instructor 2. Two different instructors, one student, receiving instructions from two professors. I'll be the philosophy professor, Professor 2 will be the English professor. Let's say that the assumption, right? The assumption is better teachers have more content to give. Let's say that the English teacher knows a wealth of information, The English teacher's read way more books than I've read, has way more content understanding than I have, lit-crit content, which sort of dabbles in philosophy, plus just regular literature and grammatical content information, plus critical analysis, plus rhetorical review. I mean, all the devices that a well-educated English scholar will have. Most of those devices are covered in philosophy for the most part. Right? There's a lot of sort of overlap between the content information. Obviously, there's content information that I have that the English scholar won't have, and there's content information that the English scholar has that I don't have. But let's just say that this English scholar has more content information than me. Well, the assumption is that since this English scholar has more content information than I do, despite the fact that the discipline is different, this instructor is a better instructor than I am because this instructor has more to give, right? There's more information that I can give you, right? There are more lines of communication, right? We can talk about the analysis of the text in terms of its grammatical structure, We can talk about or its sentence structure, or even its poetic structure. We can talk about the analysis of the book in terms of a crit analysis, which is higher order thinking, almost philosophical analysis of the characters and the setting and the tensions that develops, and all these different aspects to an analysis of the literature itself. That the argument is, if we assume this, right, if we assume this traditional educational paradigm, then the assumption has to follow that those who have more content expertise are better instructors than those who have less content expertise. And we want to say that that's false, right? For whatever reason, obviously I want to say that that's false, right? I want to say, no, we have an equal amount of knowledge to communicate to the student. My knowledge just happens to be different from the knowledge that you have, right? But if you make an assumption on this traditional educational model that content and the static transference of this knowledge is what's important, then the more of it that you have to give is the better you are as an instructor, right? And that creates problems within the academy. Okay, so that explains the role of the teacher. Next, what I want to do is I want to talk about Freire's interpretation and analysis of the role of the student, right? So now what we'll do is we'll look at the role of the student in this relationship.